All right, now we're joined by Jack Sorensen and Brent Fotz, who are here with the yes side of King County Proposition 1. So go ahead, up to 5 minutes to tell us why to vote yes.
Great, so I'm going to open up really quick with just an overview. King County Proposition 1, Access for All, is the proposal to expand access to arts, science, and heritage education for King County kids and families. The reality is that over the last decade, public funding for arts, science, and heritage programs across the state has been cut in half, despite the fact that we know that access to arts and culture and hands-on science education improves educational outcomes for kids, expands opportunity, and levels the playing field between school districts. Proposition 1 will help fix that by providing dedicated resources to every school district and every school in King County to provide free in-class arts, science, and heritage education for our county's 270,000 school kids. Proposition 1 also provides every district with free transportation and free access to our region's world-class art, science, and heritage institutions like the Pacific Science Center, MOHI, the Museum of Flight, and many others. The reality is that many families themselves also can't afford tickets to a live performance or a museum and to provide these experiences for their kids. So outside of the classroom, Proposition 1 will also allow our regional art, science, and heritage institutions to provide free or reduced price tickets for people living on a fixed budget, including seniors, people with disabilities, low-income families, and middle-class families. Finally, Proposition 1 will also provide stable funding for hundreds of smaller community-based organizations throughout the county, organizations like the Center for Wood and Boats, and require our region's large organizations to fund programs throughout the region and using partnerships with small community-based groups all throughout King County. Furthermore, these small community-based organizations that operate primarily in historically underserved communities will receive proportionally more funding than other community-based organizations. At just 1 penny for every $10 spent, or about $30 a year for the average household, Proposition 1 is going to greatly expand access to important art, science, and heritage education for King County kids and families, and we hope that you'll endorse a yes vote. And for the rest of our time, like I said, Brant is here from the Center for Wood and Boats, one of those small community-based organizations that would receive funding to expand programs and access through Access for All, and I'd like Brant to say what that means for his organization.
Terrific, thanks, Jack. So first, what is the Center for Wood and Boats? And we sometimes describe ourselves as a hands-on museum, but really it's a community where people come together from a diverse range of backgrounds, economic, social, etc., and kind of rally around a common theme of really preserving these wooden boats and the culture around it, and using it as a platform to provide life-changing experiences for people through our programs. So some examples of that are, for example, we have our Job Skills program. The Job Skills program is targeted at underserved youth, and it's a grant-funded program that allows us to bring in kids and actually give them, so this is targeted at typically high school age, at risk, and give them an opportunity to have a job. They come to work, they work on building or maintaining a boat, or some other kind of maintenance projects around the place. They learn some hard skills, but they also learn things like resume building and these kinds of things. And they just learn to come to work and work together with other people and sort of learn what it's like to have a job. Another example is our Pay What You Can program. So we have, for example, youth sailing camps where parents will come and drop off their kids every day in a row for 5 days, and they learn how to sail. And we have a scholarship program for the families that can't afford the regular price of the program. What are some of the other examples?
I think those are two great examples, and just for organizations like the Center for Wood and Boats, I mean specifically we're looking at projections of a 600% increase in funding that they receive from their For Culture grant, and ultimately at the end of the day, at the Center for Wood and Boats and nearly 350 other art, science, and heritage organizations throughout the county, that means more kids and more families in the door who otherwise wouldn't have access. The final thing that I would add on this is, I think that your district sort of has a special connection to Access for All. It was guided through the state Senate by then Senator Cole Wells. She was also the prime sponsor of the legislation in the King County Council after the state legislature gave us the permission to put something like this on the ballot, and we went to the county council and asked them to then put this on the August ballot. Councilmember Cole Wells was our primary sponsor. So with that, we would love to answer questions and help explain more about the program.
Great. Now we'll go to follow-up questions. These are 2-minute answers. We'll start with Ben.
So I was looking at the funding for your program, and it looks like it's an increase in sales tax. Sales taxes are a regressive tax. The taxes the poorest and low income more than it does the high income. Why do you think that's the fairest way to provide income for this?
Well, when the state legislature gave us the ability to ask voters to invest in art, science, and heritage access and education, they gave every county in the state the ability to do that. And they gave every county the ability to do that through a sales tax or a property tax. Then Representative Reuben Carlisle attached an amendment to the legislation requiring that King County could only do that through a sales tax. So the sales tax is the only avenue that we have. That being said, we very much believe that this program has the greatest return on investment for the same families that have concerns about paying the sales tax. At a 0.1% increase, again, we're talking about 1 penny for every $10 spent. What that means, though, is like I said, free reduced price ticket programs and access for their families and for their kids through their public school programs to more than 350 of these art, science, and heritage organizations. And one example is, let's take the Pacific Science Center, for instance. The Pacific Science Center, their education program leaders, their president and CEO, and several other folks from PacSci testified in support of this when we were going through the King County Council, and they shared a story there of a family that was experiencing homelessness, was in a home, was experiencing homelessness, and then eventually got back on their feet and got inside a home. They had 3 kids, and they were able to take advantage of a program that the Pacific Science Center offers, where instead of $120 for an annual membership, it was $19. And that at least gave a safe place for their kids to be during the day, and also during an incredibly unstable time, access to some hands-on engineering models and science classes. That sort of access and education is incredibly important for, obviously, families who are going through an experience like that. And so, again, this program has the greatest return on investment for families in need.
Thank you. John?
How much outreach was done to some of the intended beneficiaries of this levy? Did you all go out and do any kind of user-centered design with communities that are intended to be impacted by this? How do you know that the folks that you're trying to impact will use this opportunity that could be there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually, this has been a process for about a decade now of getting to the ballot. And it started with the Puget Sound Regional Council saying, hey, this is a great idea to boost our region's economy by investing in arts and culture institutions. Obviously, that's how it started, but the program today looks like, a program to expand education and access. And we have, through the about 4 or 5 year process of trying to get authorization through the state legislature, and then over the last year, and that happened in 2015, and then over the last, really year and a half, where we've been starting this work with the county council and ultimately being placed on the ballot, we've been working extensively with not just, 35 regional art, science, and heritage organizations, but another 300. Obviously, I can't rightfully say that we've spoken to all of those 300, but I can say that we've spoken to the vast majority of them. And these are organizations, not just in Seattle, not just in Bellevue, but throughout the county, in Kent, Renton, Auburn, Federal Way. We can name a group in about, every town and city in King County that has been involved in not just drafting what this program should look like, but also advocating for it in front of the county council. Does that answer your question?
I'm not sure you answered it.
Okay.
Because the types of folks you talk with are elected officials, nonprofit leaders.
Mm-hmm.
What about the actual communities that are going to be impacted? People.
So citizens that are going through these programs that will be able to benefit from these.
In the types of families that you want to be able to access Civic Science Center.
Yes, we have through our relationships with these organizations. So we've been introduced to these families like students that have graduated from their education programs, and now, since you said Museum of Flight, here's an example. A student who went through high school education programs in the Museum of Flight, now she's a sophomore at the University of Washington, and she counsels a group of young women in the Federal Way area who also want to go into careers in flight. So yes, we've engaged with folks like that. They've been a part of shaping this program and advocating for it to get this far. But those introductions obviously were made by a lot of these organizations, these nonprofits.
Great, Liz?
I'm just wondering if you can speak at all to the fact that due to confidentiality rules, in order to outreach to populations that we're talking about, you have to go through nonprofit leadership, and that those are representative, their outreach into.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely can say that is, obviously to speak to a family that's benefited from a reduced price ticket or membership program that would receive more funding and be expanded under Prop 1. We've obviously had to go to that organization and ask, do you have any families who are comfortable speaking about this? That's the way that you have to go, obviously, to find a family that is comfortable sharing their experience about financial need and receiving access to a reduced price ticket program. And actually, to talk about another community member, I think Johnny is a perfect example of that, who I've spoken to, but since you're closer to him.
Yeah, Johnny Ota is a member of the Center for Wooden Boats Board, and he works with youth care. And one of the things that he does is he brings kids from youth care down and who are maybe going through substance abuse challenges and so forth. And as part of his sort of work with them, he takes them out on a boat that we provide. We provide that access for free. And he's down there, a few times a month doing that. And so, yeah, so Johnny's been involved in providing some input into this thing as well.
Yeah, and I spoke with Johnny a lot in the fall when we were first starting this conversation with the county council to get background on Johnny's story, and thought that he was had an incredible example to share of why stuff like this is not just a cool experience for kids. For him, he was as a teenager someone who was in and out of incarceration, experienced homelessness, and struggled with addiction. He found a volunteer sailing class when he was a teenager, gave him something to work on, and he describes it as the passion that changed his life, and now he provides that experience for other teenagers experiencing similar challenges that he did. And so that is the value of programs like this, not just so kids get a sail.
If you go on YouTube and look for Johnny Ota, Center for Wooden Boats, there's a great video describing that.
Additional questions? Yeah, Sophia.
I guess I want to follow up. You had said, in answer to Ben's question about the return on investment, that you felt like this was sort of the best return on investment. And of course, we all support arts. It sounds like a great program. There's a lot of pressure right now to increase our sales tax. Schools are historically underfunded. We have a homelessness crisis. Of course, it's only 0.1%, but we could raise 0.1% and spend $67 million on something else. Why do you think this is the best return on investment for those low-income families versus all the other pressures we have right now?
So all of those other pressures are obviously incredibly important issues that, as we've heard lately, are thankfully finally going to be addressed at the county level next spring. For us, we think that expanding access to art, science, and heritage education for kids and families who otherwise wouldn't be able to because of the zip code they live in is and should be something that we can do at the same time. And someone's experience who I would share to demonstrate that is the superintendent of Kent Public Schools, who testified in support of this in front of the King County Council, Dr. Calvin Watts. And the Kent School District, nearly half the students there are on free or reduced price ticket programs, free or reduced price lunch programs. And what he said when he testified is, addressing issues like unemployment and homelessness and people struggling with addiction is absolutely something that we, and we being when he was in front of the county council, you need to address for people later in life who are experiencing this. But as a superintendent in a school district with a lot of kids from low income and struggling families, I can absolutely tell you that solving these problems also begins in the classroom, and that, you know, solving these problems for the future for these kids that are in my school district right now involves making sure that, you know, a student who never thought that they could go into a career in engineering is exposed to, you know, engineering or industry, you know, exhibits at MoHI or the Museum of Flight or something like that, or having, you know, the Kent International Festival or the Renton Historical Society be able to come into our classroom and teach our kids here for the Renton Historical Society about the history of the Duwamish people, because there's no required state education or resources for our teachers on that. And so for him, this program is about addressing those issues and is a tool in that toolbox.
All right, additional questions, Brittany?
What are the what determines the eligibility for an organization to be involved with this program, and what are the mechanics of the organization getting involved and taking advantage of this funding?
Yeah, so right now the bones of a program like this already exist. So For Culture distributes grants currently. The Center for Women Votes has a For Culture Sustaining Support Grant. For Culture has a track record of about like 3 or 4 decades of managing a program like this. This would obviously significantly expand that program from, you know, sort of a handful of money to $67 million a year for 7 years. In terms of the funding that organizations get, organizations are divided size-wise into regional organizations, which there are about 35 in Seattle and Bellevue, and actually one in far east King County, the Northwest Railway Museum, and then about 300 or so other smaller community-based organizations throughout the entire county. Center for Women Votes is in that latter category. The determination for whether or not you're a community org or a regional is based off your overall annual budget and your overall annual attendance. The money that you get is calculated for a regional based on your attendance and based on total revenue. So there's a formula involved there. For community-based organizations, it's based off of their overall budget. So they're given a portion of their budget back. And I would also say that for regional organizations, and this hasn't come up yet, but I imagine it might, you know, for regional organizations, a lot of folks wonder what that money's going to be spent on. Because these regional organizations, you know, some of them are receiving significant amounts of money, we have earmarked half of all of the grants that regional organizations receive and given them required spending. So of all the money that a regional like Pacific Science Center receives, half of it has to be spent on specific areas. 20% of that has to be spent on public school access. 15% of that has to be spent on expanding equity and inclusion outcomes and audiences served, and 15% of that has to be spent on geographic distribution, either partnering with small organizations throughout the county to provide programs, or just taking some of that money and giving it back to For Culture and saying, distribute some more money to small organizations.
Time for one more question. John?
So, given the number of organizations that will be receiving this funding, there could be very different ways that organizations get to the intended goals. Is there a system in place to track that and take some of those learnings in and share it across the system?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of reporting, you know, for the regional organizations specifically, I mean, half of, you know, I just mentioned that half of the funding is set aside and we require what they spend that money on. They have to come back to For Culture, and this is For Culture was established by King County. They have to come back to For Culture and actually show that they did that, and not just show, you know, receipts for partnering with, you know, Kent Public Schools, but they actually have to show, here's where we spent the money, here's how many kids we came in, here's how we invested the money that we have to invest on increasing equity and inclusion outcomes. Here are metrics to prove that we actually got there, rather than just telling you that, you know, we think we're doing a better job. And to get that money, they have to show that they're spending it correctly. For community-based organizations, you know, they also, you know, there's obviously reporting required for receiving these grants, but it is certainly stricter for regional organizations. And, you know, that's you know, rooted in just basic public accountability for, you know, receiving tax dollars at the amounts that regional organizations will. For community-based organizations, they're able to spend their funds on sort of a wider array of programming and needs. So like regional organizations cannot spend money on capital investments, renovations, building, anything like that. Community organizations can though, because sometimes there's a theater troupe in the Central District that is spending a lot of money a year renting out spaces for them to perform, and they really just need a black box that they can renovate and perform in. And so we want to make it possible for them to spend the money on what they need to be able to provide services.
Great, so we're about out of time. If you want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement.
Yeah, do you want to share what the investment will look like for the Center for Women Votes?
Yeah, I mean, what this will let us do is just do more of the kinds of things that we do today to provide access without barriers. So we don't charge admission. We do have a number of different programs that we offer that are for-fee programs. We have the scholarship programs that we can offer there. Today we serve about a little over 1,200 scholarship students per year. We'll be able to increase that. So yeah, it's just kind of more of that kind of stuff.
And the importance of this measure, and not just making sure that kids get to experience a play or go to a museum, but ensuring that all kids have access to the same opportunity at a hands-on learning experience that might put them on the path for a better future and a career that they never would have imagined. That's why we're proud to have endorsements from superintendents throughout King County, and we look forward to the next couple months of talking to voters more. I didn't mention this, but just so folks know, we're going to be on the August ballot.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.